Welcome to Expert Marketing Matters, a newfangled podcast that explores how entrepreneurial firms leverage their knowledge to create opportunity.
Hello, I'm Mark O'Brien, the CEO of Newfangled, and today I am joined by Diana Fryc, the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer at Retail Voodoo. She is also a partner at Retail Voodoo. Welcome, Diana.
Hi, Mark.
How are you?
I'm good. We just, we're on the other side of the country as you, and we had 2 thunderstorms today. So the world must have known you and I were talking because thunderstorms are not a Seattle thing. But I know that East Coast, sending that over as a precursor.
You got it. Yeah, very, very much an East Coast thing.
Yeah.
A little warm up sent over.
Yeah.
We're past the big thunderstorm season here in the summer.
Are you?
Yeah, they'll still happen, but in the summer, they're events.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you're in Seattle. That's a helpful bit of information.
Yeah.
And you have one other partner in the firm, right?
Yes, David Lemley, and he and I have been working together since 2006. He's had the firm since 1993, but it was under David Lemley. It was under David Lemley Design or Lemley Design, and it was in 2011 that we rebranded and specialized. So we went from a generalist firm to a specialization firm. He does the heavy lifting on all of the brand work. I am mostly on the marketing and sales side, but I have dabbled with, when I first started working with him, I was doing account management and project management. So I'm very familiar with the ins and outs of everything that we do, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. As it goes at the partnership level with agencies of our size. Yeah.
Lots of hats. Mm-hmm.
Right. That's part of the fun. Mm-hmm. And what's actually interesting and might be unique to your firm. We actually had the pleasure of working with you both when you were a generalist firm as Lemley Design back in 2009 and now as the specialist firm.
Yes. And you guys were doing something a little bit different at the time, or wider, broader, different. Well, technology was different at that time too, but yes, we did. We worked pre and post change.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's funny. Both firms actually have specialized quite a bit in very different ways, obviously, since 2009.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the Retail Voodoo story and, as part of that, your story as well.
Sure. Well, my story definitely influences where Retail Voodoo is now. I think that's probably par for the course. But just as an overview, Retail Voodoo, we brands in our area of specialization is with food, beverage, wellness, and fitness constructs of better for you naturals brands. And most of the brands that we work with are small to mid-size being up and, even up until like the $500 million range. Every once in a while we get brought into the really big guys, but the place where people need us most with that specialized brand positioning, understanding consumer audiences, all of that kind of stuff, those smaller brands tend to look for that kind of external eye and unbiased set of data and influences to help them kind of, how we call it, hockey stick. So most people don't come to us because they want something necessarily pretty, or they just need a next generation of something. They're coming to us because they're particularly, they have a new investor, they might have a new CEO, they need to change the line, sure what it is, and they need some help kind of sussing out, is it an internal influence, is it an external influence, or consumer trends are changing. So, or they're at a place of inflection where, hey, we've kind of maxed out on our channel here, where we really want to go and start either talking to different audiences or start making different foods, and what can we do before we break ourselves as a people, types of reasons. And we really specialize in that natural space for a couple of reasons. In 2011, after the big recession happened and we really needed to kind of say, okay, well, who are we going to be? It had into the organization because it got a little bit wonky there for a couple of years, and I went out and did some consulting I want a different way. Would you come and help me? I'd love it if you just help me for 10 years later. Right. And he said, help me figure out where we should go. So we took a look at our portfolio. We took a look at our passions at the time. Or naturals and organics was still kind of this hippie type of area. It was just starting to bloom from a CPG standpoint. And his son was having some issues with some health. And I had been a longtime organic naturopathic kind of modern day hippie, or what most natural consumers are now, is what I always was. And so we said, let's take our big CPG, our work that we've done with Pepsi and Walmart and, the NBA and all of these brands that we've worked with, and let's start creating a package that will work for these smaller organizations, companies that don't have the experience, nor do they have the pocketbook to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on advertising, and help them kind of get their unfair share of marketplace. So that's what we did, is we said, okay, we're going to specialize in this place. We're really passionate about it. And my passion, like the reason why I was really passionate about that was, well, my parents, first of all, were immigrants to the United States from Central Europe. And part of the way we grew up was probably less CPG and more closer to real food and real, if you got sick, then you had honey and, all the things that, grandmas and grandparents did, but I lived closer to that. So I was already comfortable with that and already believed in that as part of my upbringing. And then in the late 90s, I was working with an agency that doesn't exist anymore. It was a design firm specifically. And we were working on a project with Jane Goodall. And I had a very specific role. I had the job of a production manager. And Jane Goodall, my role within the designing the brand of the organization was, I had to find paper and a printer and manufacturers that could build all of these pieces that had a zero environmental impact on the planet, because it's Jane Goodall.
Right.
Now, in 1999, the Google as we know it did not exist. So I was literally on the phone 24 hours a day, not for 24 hours a day, but I'd be making calls at 2 or 3 in the morning, calling places in Asia and in France. And I was over the world, and I was literally having to interview all these people. And I had a big list, like, do you pay your people well? What do you do with your wastewater? Do you do blah, blah, blah? And I had to do that for each single process. There was no certification at the time. And as I started taking Jane's passion, I literally, she was in our office. I met this short little lady who had more energy than our entire studio. And her you're just going to do it because I said so. And yes, whatever you need, Miss Jane, whatever you need. And then just taking that passion and then doing all of the work and going, oh my gosh, I've talked to how many printers and how many suppliers, and look at, they can't check off all of these things. And I started to go, what is going on in the planets? And just kind of this whole environmental and better just became part of my process. As I progressed in my career, I became the first person in the Seattle area to really promote environmental printing, environmental paper. And that's actually how I originally met David, was through that channel. And so it just, I met him one day, and then the next thing you know, I was working for him. And I mean, there's 10 years in between those things.
Sure. Yeah.
But so lots of influences, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a quite deep, lifelong story. That's wonderful. I didn't realize it went quite that far back. So, the thing, we work with firms all the time, who are, in every case, they're at least focusing closer in on a certain market position. Oftentimes they're embracing a market position for the first time. There's lots of concern, anxiety, it's a leap of faith. And so how did that feel in 2011, right? I mean, in some ways, okay, it was 2011. So, everyone was somewhat humbled, and it was a good time to start things anew. But still, that's a risk. There's a lot of fear involved. And how did you and David come about, deciding to really commit to this and take it seriously? And how did it feel?
Well, I mean, just like anything, that it was scary because you're stepping away from what seems like a whole bunch of business. When you're a generalist and you can have everything and you can do everything, you feel like when you specialize, you're like, oh, I'm walking away from a bunch of things. And then also, there's a little PTSD for those of us that kind of went through that time. There's a little PTSD, like every rejection is, oh my gosh, we're going to lose this. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be working from a 400 square foot apartment, like every hit. So every hit was more powerful at the time, but then every win was just some self-validation. So shortly after we developed that position, we landed actually a very large project for a local retailer called PCC, Puget Sound Consumer Co-op, or Community Market. They've gone through another rebrand since then, but at the time, we had rebranded them in like 2004. In 2011, they said, we need an entire new shopping experience. We know you've worked with REI and we know you've worked with Walmart. So can you bring that experience into our retail and create an experience for consumers? So that was the first win. And then Brooks came on board, and then slowly but surely it ended up being easier, because now instead of who should I market to, all of a sudden it was like, I'm marketing to these people, and my list building became much easier. My script was much easier. I only had, 2 or 3 different types of people that I'm talking to. The need states look like X, Y, and Z. And so it became a little bit more simpler. And then with each new client that came on, or each really good conversation that you had, you start to build a little bit of confidence. And then, you're rebuilding the team, and now your portfolio is starting to change a little bit, and you're starting to see more and more of, and you have people come and go, and I want exactly that, what you did for so-and-so. We want that same thing. And it just becomes a little bit more easier of a conversation.
Sure, 100%. And that was actually really beautifully put in terms of the steps of it and the stages. And I've seen those stages play out so many times. Can you imagine now going back to selling a generalist firm? Like if tomorrow you had to take your same role, but do it for a generalist firm?
Not for a generalist firm. No, definitely not for a small agency, because now it's just, the market is so different. Like if I was a generalist, I'd have to go work for like OINR or something like that, where where the marketing and the advertising was big. But I would have a hard time not being a specialist or specializing in certain categories. That would be tough for sure.
It'd be so tough, especially in your role, being responsible. You're responsible with biz dev, right? I mean, it's biz dev without specialization is, I don't know. From my perspective, is impossible. So it's been about 10 years, right? 2011 to now. We're almost at 2021. Can't get here soon enough in some regards. Hopefully that's a good thing. Hopefully we're happy about 2021 when we get there. So what's it been like since? I mean, what does sales and marketing look like now? And how does it feel to be in this specialist firm that's really like now deeply rooted and recognized as such?
Yeah, it's so the market has changed dramatically every time technology changes, or in our particular category, or I'm going to say this, let me start all over. What I'm trying to say is the marketing is easier technically because we know who we're talking to, we know who our audience is. The competitive market is again quite challenging because we're in another one of those times where we've got downward pressure. Anytime you see a recessionary type spending, which we started seeing about a year ago, but then of course when March came along and the world changed so drastically, you've got a lot of people out there that are willing to do anything for anything. So margins are a little bit tough. We still are talking to the same type of audiences. Like the needs are still there. There was about 3 or 4 months where things got quiet, kind of like what 2008 felt like. And then because we work in an industry that the products are consumable, food, shampoo, everybody has to eat, the people have to shampoo, and the supply chain started to relax a little bit because that was also an issue, toilet paper, running out of toilet paper. How are we going to get rice from South Africa or South America or whatever? Like all of that kind of leveled out. We're starting to see some spending again, and it's the people are still coming in. I find it very interesting that there's a lot of entrepreneurs and startups. So I feel like a lot of people kind of either lost their job or left their job or said, I don't want to do this anymore. And there's a lot of innovation that's popping up. So I'm having conversations with a lot of people who are interested in creating something new, which is super inspiring. It's finding those people who are like the people that are needing to make change. They're in the middle now. They're not a really established brand, but they're not young. And so they need to keep making sure that their sales are going up. They're the ones that are having the most challenging conversations. They're not big enough to really demand inventory or demand anything from their supply chain, but they're no longer small enough that, if their sales drop by 5%, that's hard for them. So they're in a big deal. Right? So financially they're in a tricky place. And also those investors in the category, this is what specialization allows me to be able to do is I understand what's happening with these brands at a business level. And so when I'm talking to them, it's not literally like, well, let's make this nice marketing thing. I can talk to them about the things that are impacting them. So the actual business strategy, because at the end of the day, I know how the marketing is going to impact our business. Or if they're coming to us and they're talking about here's what's happening in their business, sometimes I'll say, you need to figure that out before you start spending any money in marketing. You might want to do this Band-Aid approach for a while and then come back once that's resolved, because we don't want people to unnecessarily spend marketing if at the end of the day, that's not actually the real solution for them.
Right. And those, of course, oftentimes end up being your best clients ultimately because the amount of trust you earn in that conversation is just, invaluable.
Yeah.
And I see that too. And you and I basically occupy the same role.
Yes.
Right. And I was a poetry major in college.
Oh, you were? I would never have guessed that. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I should take that as a compliment or an insult, but
Neither. It's interesting. That's kind of cool.
It's interesting. Yeah. And my professor, who I, just idolized, I kind of built my entire education around this guy.
Okay.
And he just won a Pulitzer. So
I feel pretty
good about that.
Oh.
He's wonderful. And he was really wonderful to me. But I distinctly remember him saying it was during a class. And of course, for class, we didn't have it in the classroom. We went to one of the students' houses and we all had wine and, that's how it was. And I remember us all sitting around and all starry eyed at this professor. And he was like, it doesn't really matter what you do in life as long as you don't become a salesperson.
We have such a bad rap. And yet, I heard some crazy statistic that something like 50% of the sales force is sales related or is sales related. Companies, you don't sell anything unless you've got a salesperson, period. End of story, So we get a bum rap, don't we?
Well, we do. And I don't think of myself as that. Right. And if Newfangled weren't specialized, I wouldn't, basically when you get on a call with a prospect, you're helping them right away.
Yeah.
You're they're going to know more about their problem and different avenues to fix it and probably know more about their business after that call with you because you know more about their field than they do because you're the expert in the field. And when you're able to have those kind of conversations and just start delivering value right away, not solving their problem before they hire you, not that kind of thing. Just caring about their issues, understanding their issues in a very deep and all-encompassing way.
Yeah.
And, providing value that feels good. That is edifying for all involved.
Yes.
And so, that I can do and that I love doing. But if it was my job to move 50 cars off the lot by the end of the day,
that's a different.
I don't.
When you're selling a commodity, when you're selling a commodity, it's a little bit different. Well, and it even depends on what the commodity is. But for me, sometimes we have people that come to us that actually know their job better than I do. The value that you have and that I have is we're that external eye. We don't have a vested interest. We're the doctor. You go because just like yesterday. I've been having trouble with my low back, and I was convinced that it was a spine issue. And I went in to see the massage therapist, and she goes, "No, your hip flexor is blah, blah, blah." And it was like, oh, well, because she's agnostic to the solve. I'm, whatever. And it's not exactly the same, but sometimes it's not that you know more. In your case with us, with Retail Voodoo, you guys definitely have an area of expertise that I've learned a lot from, and you guys know more than I do. But sometimes, like when we work with an essential water, like they're really smart people on there. And the reason why they come to us is they need that external eye to be able to go, have you considered this? Or you're huffing your own fumes over here, or what, whoever the brand is, whether it's Russell Stover or, essential water. We've worked with some people that are really smart. We just have the ability to know what we're doing and have the external eye. In a way that they don't have it.
The objectivity. And also the external voice also is oftentimes listened to more seriously.
That's the truth. Yeah.
That helps. That helps as well.
Well, I think I heard David has quoted me, is that the average tenure of a CMO and a CPG is about 24 months. That's so, your job is to come in and depending on who you are, you come in and you go, I want to make my mark, and then bounce to the next thing, which means you're not necessarily setting up the organization for a long-term win. You're, versus the ones that are like, I want to stay here for a while and build an empire. And there's different kinds of, we tend to work with the change makers and the ones that are the empire builders. We're not typically working with, say, the Boeings of the world where, these people are like incremental growth. I just want to keep my job and I hope I'm not offending anybody. But there are those kinds of people. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sure. One of the biggest trends this year, obviously in the field of sales and marketing, overall biz dev, is the end of the conference, right? And that's been a big deal in Newfangle's business because we would attend a lot of those. And one thing that we've always said about positioning is that one of the greatest indicators of a strong positioning is whether or not your audience congregates. And your audience does congregate in a very big way at the Fancy Food Show, which was fully canceled this year, right? It was supposed to be in April, was it?
Well, there's 3 shows that we attend on the regular, and then a handful of these are nice to haves. So the Natural Products Expo is really who our audience is. And that's a twice-a-year show canceled. They pushed back the winter version for 2021 to May in hopes that it will be in person. Fancy Foods, also twice a year, January show was just canceled last week. And then there's a Sweets and Snack show. And then there's things like BevNet. And there's a bunch of places where there's just a bunch of places because food and beverage is a commodity. It's not like a hard good, like in sportswear, in wellness, you buy a bike once every 15 years, or you might have 7 bikes, but something that goes into your cart once a week, once a month is something that changes and allows the marketplace to change rapidly too. And so therefore the conferences require greater, there's just more need for frequency to meet. And it's a really, for as big as it is, it's a pretty tight knit community too. Yeah.
I bet. And you've been on the scene for so long now. But my question is, what's it like now as a marketer, as a business development person without these conferences? Yeah. What's it been like?
I don't like it. I think in the sales capacity, it draws a certain type of personality, and most of the time it's extroverts. And those conferences and even conversations like the one that you and I are having right now are things that fuel us, being able just network, not simply for business purposes, for our own purposes, but my superpower is connecting people. It's a pleasure and a joy for me if I have somebody who reaches out to me and says, can you help me find somebody that can X? And I'll be like, great, I have 15 of them. Look, there's some pure joy there. And then I also am fueled by learning from these people, being around the innovation. And so for me personally, it's been a challenge. That's been a fuel for me personally. From a business standpoint, it's difficult. The virtual shows are not the same. You just can't. You can't see people. No. You can't meet people. Yeah. It's changed the way we've needed to do business because those trade shows were kind of what would fuel us up for several months at a time from conversations and project loads. So now we're having to switch to things like advertising, which is fine and great, and it fills our pipeline from a marketing standpoint. We've upped our social media game. I myself have started a podcast, but the podcast really wasn't a sales tool. It was really kind of a passion play, but inadvertently it's turning into a sales tool, which is weird.
One of the best kinds.
Yeah. So we've had to get flexible. We've had to just kind of get over some of those comfortable ways of doing business and just start doing things differently. Yeah.
Yeah. Ma'am. And do you expect a full return at some point in 2021? So you mentioned that one of the shows postponed in May. Are you holding your breath for that? Are you just getting on with it? What's your posture?
Well, it gets tricky. It depends on how the November elections go. If they go one way, I'll be surprised if we are back in play before the end of the year. We might see Q4 probably start to look normal. If we go the other way, I think we might be at Q3. I think super optimistic that Q2 is going to happen, just simply because you got to get everybody inoculated, and there's like the physical part. So, the difference is a matter of who's in charge, and it'll go faster this way. But I mean, I would say by the end of 21, I'm hopeful that Q4 at the very latest will be, if I'm listening to Fauci, he says Q3. He's smarter than I am at these things, so I'll give him a little bit of credit.
He seems to be a trustworthy voice in the conversation.
Yeah, but I'm hopeful. I would think the really big shows will probably be later in the year. I think smaller shows, more contained shows will be maybe earlier in the year. So things that kind of like test the water, Yeah. So like Expo will have 80 to 100,000 people normally attend, maybe not, versus something that where it's like usually we see 20,000 people. You can kind of control that a little bit better. So we'll see.
And my last question here, what do you see in the future, the next 3 to 5 years for Retail Voodoo? What does it look like if you had to guess?
Yeah, if I had to guess, that's a really good question. My podcast and David, who's my business partner, he is a painter. He's also my husband. So we are now husband and wife. We worked before, but we are now. And
congratulations.
Yeah. And so the events of 2020 have actually fueled a little bit of fire for us. One for me is they're both kind of equality related. And so what we see ourselves doing is I'm actively pursuing helping women founder owners, entrepreneur type of brands. And he and I are both wanting to use our talents and our resources to help BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, and disabled people, basically diversity. The big point of my podcast is there's little diversity in the leadership in the naturals category, and it's not a good representation of the United States. And part of that is visibility. So I want to elevate the visibility of the diversity that should be in the industry so that other women, can aspire to being leaders or starting their own businesses. And David is the same. So we want to be able to create opportunity. And sometimes it's working directly with brands, and sometimes it's us donating our times. But I think we're wanting to grow a business so that we can elevate kind of underrepresented organizations or brands and give. And so I would be surprised if that's not going to start to help lead us in a different direction so that we can give we want to basically create opportunity for these brands in a way that they haven't typically, or these leaders in a way that we haven't typically done in the past. And that's all just from 2020. I mean, who knows what's going to happen next, but always wanting to help leaders get their unfair share of market without having to break the bank. That's really our goal at the end of the day.
I love that. That's a beautiful vision. And, there are a lot of people talking along, some of those lines roughly, but knowing you and David, you'll actually do this.
Well, we're both a little stubborn. So I think that once we put our mind to something, it basically goes in that direction. And there's already, the evidence, it's not visual evidence. And so we're not looking for gold stars or accolades. We're doing the work in the background, and we're helping those people, and those brands are getting the help that they need. Will it ever be forward facing? I don't know. The goal at the end of the day, like I said, is not to have this superhero cape and say, look at this great thing that we're doing. We really just want to be doing the good work.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that good work.
Yeah. Thank you.
And you've got a great firm. You've got an excellent firm, and you're a wonderful leader in the industry. Your name came up actually in a prospect call recently, and it completely changed the tenor of the call. It was quite interesting. Like, oh, Diana, okay, yeah. like they weren't really sure about us. They didn't know about us. And I mentioned your name, and that was it. The entire conversation flipped. The fact that you trusted us went a very long way. It's probably because you're a Donald Duck tea mug.
Might be.
Has nothing to do with it. But thanks so much. Thanks so much for doing what you do, and for agreeing to spend this time with me today.
Pleasure.
Really enjoyed it, for sharing your story. Very inspirational. I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot from it, and hopefully, first and foremost, will get some courage that they need to drive
courage
through your example.
Is big. You have to work through the scare. That's what.
I like that. Yeah. That might be the title right there.
Work through the scare. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Diana.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Of course. You have a good rest of your day.